Welcome to video 3 about using point rig geometry to create structural arches. In the last two videos I kind of showed one methodology in which I created multiple horizontal planes, hosted transverse ribs, and then lofted an arch through those ribs. Oh, and by the way, I'm calling this a structural arch. There's no structural mathematics in this. I'm just showing you the kind of visual aspects of forming the bones for it. A true catenary or parabola is more sophisticated. I'm kind of just trying to get about the methodology of creating structure for it. The math can be imparted later through parameters. So in this case, I'm not going to actually host points on levels, horizontal planes. I'm going to use my my front-back plane to host a series of reference points. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Maybe look at those in elevation. You know, if I want this thing to start from the ground, I can drag and kind of snap them to the ground level. But otherwise, these guys are hosted on a vertical plumb plane. So again, I'm going to take these guys and I'm going to create a spline through points. And again, that creates a model line, but I want this to be resilient bones for my geometry that doesn't dissolve when the geometry gets erased. So I'm going to make it a reference line. And now what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to select my points. I'm going to filter out my reference line. And there is a Show Reference Planes button. I'm going to say Show Reference Planes Always. And kind of uncheck the Show Normal Reference Planes because I want to kind of see all of them. The cool thing about Revit and its reference planes is it's giving me the kind of tilted reference plane that follows the spline, but it's also giving me an X, Y, and Z, and those are the ones I want to kind of take advantage of at this moment. So what I'll do is I'm going to set a plane, pick the Set Plane tool, and I'm going to grab the plane of that reference point. And then I'm going to do a spline through point on that plane. And I'm going to do that for each of these guys. So if I come down and set, sometimes they shrink when you zoom in, which is kind of a pain, but if you tab around you can find the ones that you need. Let's see if I can do this as a reference spline through point. So I don't have to do that extra step of having to go into the properties dialog box. Now I'll grab this guy. He's on the ground, but he may not be always, so why don't I just grab him, make him my plane. I just showed you what that plane is. Create a reference spline through points. I'm right-clicking to cancel out of that command, so I can just do 3 per plane. And you see I'm actually, it's a transparent command, so I'm clicking the Set button while I'm in the middle. I've still got my reference spline through points command active. Just saves you a little bit of a few clicks, which are always good for the click frugal. So now I've got these splines, and if we take a look at what's happening, before I was actually driving planes up and down to control the geometry, but this is a kind of interesting method because now I've got this pure sectional arcing profile that is pretty visible, and if I tab through, start driving it, you see that center transverse arch, which is sort of an independent thing. It's following that point. It's following the plane of that point. So I can do a lot with my transverse spines. And again, let's see if these guys, since they're all flat, if it's going to kick again and not allow me to make a form. Yeah, it did it again. Funny. So I'll window over some of these guys. I'm going to grab 1 point per spline and just kind of offset it some amount. In this case, I'll do it 1 meter. So I've just put a little bit of 3-dimensionality into each one of those splines. which I think it just insists upon having for you to create the vaulted arch. So there's my vaulted arch, and it's kind of, this is an interesting way of thinking about it, because I can give myself a little air, move these guys over, and if I tab through to this geometry, I can start driving all this geometry from over here, and I can think about the longitudinal sectional characteristics and the transverse sectional characteristics in a different way. And actually, what I'm seeing now that I find interesting, I think I must have missed this center spline when I created that. Or did I not lift this guy off the ground? No, he's off the ground. So let's see if maybe I just forgot to select him when I made that original loft, because it lofted past him. Nope, there it is. I must have just forgotten to select it. I was wondering why there was a gap between it. Yeah, now we're in business. So I think that this is kind of an interesting way to go about setting geometry. It gives you kind of one controllable arch that you can begin to impart true catenary or parabolic mathematics upon, and then you can kind of control your plan and sectional characteristics with geometry that is kind of residing on these planes, but it's pushed off to one side so you can see what's going on. And remember, when I load this into my project, it's giving me a note that it's only planar. Thank you, I knew that. When I push this into the project, you can see that the reference bones aren't really showing. But if I impart any parameters on those points, like if I tab back into my control tab back into my file, if I start parameterizing these heights, or if I maybe try and link those guys to levels that I'm pushing up and down, those parameters will show up if you make them an instance parameter right in the project dialog box. If I grab this guy, any parameters I've created will show up here. And I think I made this for the last family. If I make that 3 meters, it's, oh, I'm sorry, this is the offset for like the whole object, so it's just pushed it 3 meters above 0, 0, which is, I guess it's interesting and maybe useful. I'm not quite sure why I'd want that general offset for the whole thing, but it's there and you can use it as a default. So that's video 2, and in some ways this is a much simpler way of going about this. I don't think I'm going to get into the mathematics of parabola because that's beyond my pay grade. I'll allow somebody else to address that. But I hope this has helped and been interesting for you, and thanks for listening.